Joining us now for Word Brief and the review of some of the headlines of today's newspapers from around the world is Adefemi Akinsanya. Good morning, Adefemi.
Good morning, Dr. Rubin. How are you doing?
I'm good.
Good morning, Ayo. Good morning, Rufai. Hello. That is me. Let me tell you about what's happening around the world. Now, could war be over? After Israel's invasion of Lebanon 2 months ago, a ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah has formally started today. The deal was brokered by the United States and France and has been welcomed by residents in both countries, where celebrations have been taking place on the streets overnight. There is also optimism of a ceasefire in Gaza, but the question that comes to the minds of many is, will this ceasefire hold? Over the next 60 days, Israel is due to pull its army out of Lebanon, and Hezbollah too must withdraw to the north of the Litani River. Lebanon's army will take control of the territory near its border with Israel to ensure that Hezbollah does not rebuild its infrastructure there. Now, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said he will respond forcefully to any violation of the ceasefire by Hezbollah. Now, for decades, there have been calls for visa-free travel for Africans traveling across Africa, and a new report from the Africa Visa Openness Index has highlighted the disparity once again. The index measures the extent to which each African country is open to visitors from other African countries. Let's take a look. Benin Republic, the Gambia, Rwanda, and Seychelles are the only African countries to offer visa-free access to all African countries. Out of the 54 countries that were tallied, Nigeria is ranked 6th, so it's done very, very well. In Nigeria, 17 countries, mostly in West Africa, of course due to ECOWAS, can travel visa-free to Nigeria. This also includes the Seychelles. The remaining 36 countries can get a visa to enter Nigeria on arrival. However, countries with the lowest visa openness in Africa were Equatorial Guinea, Libya, and Sudan. So if we take a look at this, you can see Equatorial Guinea, you can see it's completely red. Red represents countries where you must have a visa before entering, and then green is no visa required, so just 2 countries there, and then the small blue dot is the country itself. And then if we look at South Africa now, South Africa, you can see a lot of North and West Africa, and Central Africa is in red. You will need a visa to enter South Africa from these countries, but in southern African countries, there is no visa requirement. But what's funny is that Nigerians who are trying to get to South Africa either have to get a passport from perhaps the Caribbean or have a different passport. They struggle to get visas to go to South Africa. I think Aisha Yusuf talked about how she was asked by South Africa to give her father's death certificate in her visa process. So again, I think this is a great thing for Nigeria to show that it is leading, not as much leading, but among the highest countries that have visa openness. You can see the color in terms of the disparity. All of that yellow represents that these countries can come to Nigeria and get a visa on arrival. And then the green ones, as we said, ECOWAS countries, they don't need a visa to come into Nigeria. And just to notice, you see that South Africa is also in yellow, which means that South Africans can get a visa on arrival, but it's not the case for Nigerians going to South Africa. So I thought it was really interesting to look at the disparities in travel.
Let me just make it very funny. You say joke.
Okay.
Why is it that Equatorial Guinea is red? At a time where a lot of people are looking for Equatorial Guinea passports, you know.
Are they?
Have you been under the rock? Moving on. That means
to get where he's going.
You are Johnson like a bellow.
Oh.
Moving on. Okay, so I want to quickly really talk about Hezbollah and the peace deal and all of that. Yeah, the negotiation has been on for a while. Finally, Netanyahu says he's going to take the deal back, to his war cabinet. But his war cabinet is divided, actually. You've got some hardliners like Give and the like saying that, no, they're not going to take it with Hezbollah. The deal is pretty much the troops. Israel will definitely pull out, and the Hezbollah troop will back up the Litani River. And once they do that, and there's going to be buffer created by the Lebanese army, it's pretty much a clean deal. But Israel is also saying in the mix that when you look at it, if they discover any tunnels that Hezbollah has probably built, they're going to report, to the other parts of the agreement.
Right.
And, there's also another story that's quite very scary, where another minister in Israel was, call it even for a complete obliteration and all of that. And when you look at that deal back and forth, yes, it's a welcome development because the bombing cannot continue at this point in time. And Israel has really achieved some of the main aims. You know, they've gotten the top leader of Hezbollah and the likes, Nasrallah is no more and all of that. But people on the Palestinian bank are also skeptical because they're saying, okay, if Israel pulls out of Lebanon, then it's not going to allow Israel the chance to focus on them. Yeah. Because since October last year, over 15,000 people have been injured, over 3,000 people have been killed over the Israeli and the Lebanon front. So the Hamas camp, they're scared. And I think what the minister was even saying was Israel should, you know, reduce the population of Palestine and get some more Israelis to come in. There's sort of like an occupation of some sort, which a lot of people are kicking against and saying, no, you cannot do this because we now need to discuss the future of the Middle East. So probably this is a big win for them, Joe Biden, if it finally sails through. But I think the biggest win will be as regards that deal they need to do, you know, with the Palestinians and Hamas, and you know, and get a peace, a ceasefire of some sort in.
Thank you, Rufai. Go ahead, Ayo.
All right, let me talk about the visa openness. I'm very interested in this because if we're going to trade, we're going to promote intra-African trade, and we have to be able to talk about movement of goods and people across the African continent freely. Great to see that Nigeria is doing sixth. A number of people have complained about the visa process in some instances coming into Nigeria, so it's good to see that when it comes to African countries, other African countries, we are open enough to say that most of them, if you're not in the ECOWAS region, can get you obtain your visa on arrival. So that's kudos to the Ministry of Interior and also, you know, to see the great work they've done. But there's still a lot of work being done. It's a shame to see the numbers revealed by this report, especially from countries that have continued to close their borders to other African countries, yet are opening their borders to countries. It's easier, like you said, to come from the US, Canada, the United Kingdom, and fly to a country like South Africa than it is to come from Nigeria. It's not just the fact that you need to obtain a visa. It's the process of getting the visa and the rate of refusal of visa applications. It's almost ludicrous. There are frequent travelers I know who have been refused South African visas, for instance, and they want to go for a conference, do business. How are we going to actualize the terms of the African continental free trade area if we're not able to even open our borders to one another? So a number of things have to be dealt with. There's a matter of trust. There's a matter of diplomatic conversations or diplomatic relationships from country to country. In 2024, we shouldn't still be having this conversation. I'll just end by, I think there was a quote I saw by Dr. Akinwumi Adesina in regards to this report. And I thought it was very apt, especially because he's pushed very, very strongly for this. He says, apart from the fact that you need connectivity, you also need to have freedom for people to move from one place to another. I believe we cannot say we have borderless trade when we put up barriers for people to travel.
Agreed.
Okay, on this African Open Visa Initiative Index, what it's called, right?
Yes.
It is sponsored, we must know, by the African Union and also the African Development Bank. So it's not as if it's a frivolous thing that some non-governmental organization did, because the AFDP and also the African Union, they are committed to this promotion of intra-African trade under the auspices of the African Free Trade Continental Agreement, AFCTA, as it is otherwise called. So it's a serious matter in terms of transportation, movement of goods and persons and services across the continent. But the part of it that I would like to comment on is that Nigeria, well, more or less did well. Sixth, you know, out of 54 countries. Very out of patriotism, I would like to draw our attention to a story that occurred in April 2024 when CNN reporter Larry Madowo gave a report and said Nigeria's visa is too expensive, that he had to pay over $600 visiting Nigeria 3 times to get Nigerian visa. And then he cited the example of Kenya, his own country. Right. Because he's from Kenya. Which fell
17 places, I have to tell you.
17, you know, it used to be 17, it's gone to 46.
Yes.
Out of 54. Now it is Kenya that everybody is saying is not doing well. And yet when Nigeria was embarrassed because of visa, Larry Madowo was seen as a hero, saying he travels around as a reporter. Up Nigeria!
Nigeria!
Well, I don't want to say down Kenya.
You just did.
No, I didn't say that. but, Nigeria can also do better because that will help trade. It will help to achieve the objectives of the government.
Agreed.
As to the ceasefire that has been reached. Well, from the point of view of diplomacy, this ceasefire that has been brokered by U.S. and Israel and France, and Biden says it's good news, I think it's a welcome development. But however, it should be taken with a pinch of salt. If you listen to Benjamin Netanyahu yesterday, he was boasting that they have recorded significant achievements anyway against Hezbollah, and that the Hezbollah has been set back 10 years. And that this ceasefire, Israel has agreed upon it because it needs to focus on the retaliation against Iran. So the first question is, what are the implications for peace? 2, you asked the question, will the ceasefire hold? Well, Netanyahu also yesterday gave a condition that military freedom of action will be maintained in the case of any violation of the agreement by Hezbollah. Number 3 is that neither side wants to show that they have surrendered.
Right.
Yesterday alone, 150 targets in Lebanon were hit. And also in northern Israel, there were, warnings that people should go into the shelter. With both sides, even on the eve of the agreement, showing that, the war is still on if anybody goes out of line. Domestically, I don't think it's popular with the Israelis. 4,000 people have been killed. Over 1 million people have been displaced. In northern Israel, the people that are mostly affected, 80% of them say they do not agree. Within the country, generally, about 32% of the Israelis think that, in fact, Benjamin Netanyahu has surrendered. That's the perception there. So it's a very tricky situation. But for us, as outsiders looking at it, Netanyahu can deal with the objection from his domestic rivals, but internationally, what we just asked for is global peace.
Thank you so much for all of your comments in the World Brief. Let's move on to newspaper headlines across the world. And another question to ask is there a new dawn on the fuel horizon? Well, this day leads with the commencement of operations at the Port Harcourt refinery. After a long period of rehabilitation, the Port Harcourt refineries comprise 2 units, with the old plant having a refining capacity of 60,000 barrels per day, and the new plant having one of 150,000 barrels per day, both summing up to 210,000 barrels per day. A lot of numbers there. The New Telegraph also joins a host of Nigerian newspapers this morning to highlight the excitement trailing the NNPC's delivery of the reopened Port Harcourt refinery. The Daily Sun, the Tribune and Daily Independent all followed suit with news of this story, of this refinery on their front pages. Now, The Guardian, in true Guardian fashion, the paper breaks down the timeline of the Port Harcourt refinery from 2015, when former President Muhammadu Buhari declared Nigeria would stop importing petroleum products by 2019, to what we're seeing in present-day 2024. The Guardian also features news that the Enugu State Governor, Peter Mba, has presented a 951 billion naira budget to the House of Assembly in the state. And that's also after he says that IGR, internally generated revenue in the state, has jumped from 37 billion naira to 144 billion. The Punch leads with news that former Kogi State Governor Yahaya Bello is currently in the detention of EFCC in facilities in Abuja. Bello was declared wanted by the Anti-Corruption Commission in April over an alleged 110 billion naira fraud. He faces 16 charges. I think it was previously 19. Now, a story on the top of the Daily Nation of Kenya this morning reports on Raila Odinga pitching his camp in West Africa as he looks for support in the region behind his bid to become the next chairperson of the African Union. He had a meeting with Senegalese president on Tuesday to this effect. And then finally, UK papers, including The Guardian, are of course leading with the news of this ceasefire deal between Israel and Lebanon. But one story that caught my attention on the front page of The Guardian is a study by the Journal of Epidemiology and Community Health. And it finds that irregular bedtimes raise the risk of heart attack or stroke by 26% and recommends between 7 to 9 hours of sleep every single night. How do you sleep?
No, very, very importantly, I mean, so in my former life, I I'm a trained scientist, animal physiologist, and in my former life, I did a lot of work on something called the circadian rhythm.
Okay.
The circadian rhythm is what makes it easy for you, once it gets dark, to be able to sleep. So once rhythms are distorted, it's an after effect on your body. And that's why sleep is very important. Not just sleeping, but sleeping at a particular time, having a sleep ritual, and sleeping appropriately. A lot of people don't get enough good sleep in the night. And that's why you see people fall down with all sorts of illnesses because of the stress and everything about life and livelihood in general. So there's a lot of work that's been done into that, and I think people should be able to take it. As regards Ruto, I'm not saying Ruto shouldn't aspire. Please don't get me wrong. He can aspire for whatever he's going to aspire. But has he solved the problems deep within his area, his country as it is? Because in his hands, he's got a country that is struggling with a lot of economic crisis. Today, they're still trying to raise money as regards the finance bill.
Right.
And all of that has been repealed. They have a lot of challenges. And the next thing Ruto is doing, he wants to start junketing. I think it was just only recently he was trying to support Raila Odinga to be able to push him for the African Union
well, yes,
Commission.
that's exactly it, yes.
You get. So what is all of this madness that he is doing? Paying back people for election favors, or because he wants to win Raila over for next elections? Is that the madness that is now going on, rather than facing the problems on ground?
Lots of questions
In fact,
there.
the likes of Professor Lumumba started a challenge against that process and against Odinga in Kenya. I was with Professor Lumumba when those papers went out in Kenya.
Well, let's see if he's able to do it.
Two things. Now, I don't know what those motivational speakers who tell you that if you're sleeping 7 to 9 hours, you're sleeping away your destiny. I hope you know that you're cutting short your life, and so it's important. When you said that, I was like thinking, oh my goodness, so what's going to happen in Lagos, a state like Lagos, where traffic situation means that you're not getting up to 6 hours or 7 hours of sleep. But it's just something to note. We've seen a number of young people just slumping and dying, or people just, having cardiac arrest or heart attacks. So it's great to see, to see this report and to encourage more people to sleep. Then going on to former governor of Kogi State, Yahaya Bello. I know we have a guest later on to discuss this in detail. But just to say that for the second time, he presented himself. The story is told in different ways, depending on what newspaper you're reading. Some say, oh, he was apprehended, or it was, by EFCC. Others say he walked. He walked in, and unlike the last time, maybe because of the uproar that followed the last time, they made sure that this time they detained him and didn't wait for the due process that they said they were waiting for.
Of course.
He's going to be in court this morning, so we'll see what the outcome of that would be. And then to understand that this thing that has become so dramatic, maybe we finally see some kind of end to it, and see due process being followed properly.
Thanks, Ayo.
Okay, for me, it's a very oily day. We started the program by talking about the Port Harcourt refinery. Yesterday, we talked about Dangote refinery and the marketers and all that. Now, there's a story that interests me that didn't come up, but it's also within that industry. The window story in the Daily Sun of today is not part of your list, but I find it intriguing that we talk about the procurement process in Nigeria. Now, the story says that all producing states have taken the revenue mobilization and fiscal policy group, in fact, they've taken them to court on the grounds that one company represented the oil-producing states and was able to get unremitted revenue from the revenue mobilization body. But now, when payment is to be made, they said a company that was not there when that contract was executed, I think the company that they said executed the project was Zecon Group or whatever. Now they want to pay another company, creating some kind of, untidiness. And now the matter will go to court. The affected company, Zecon Higgins, has petitioned President Tinubu. I think President Tinubu should look into the matter. But beyond that, it's about the procurement process and the opaqueness in the procurement process that we have in Nigeria. Daily Sun talked that story in one corner, but I think it's important now that we're talking about the need for greater transparency and accountability in the oil and gas sector. We complain about contractors not doing their work. One contractor does the job, you want to pay another. Who is doing that abracadabra?
Exactly. Where did they do that? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Femi. We'll see you again tomorrow morning.